How does it all end? An ominous question for sure, more so given current events in life, but then again, we're just edgy around here. For humanity, we aren't really sure how the lights are going to go out. On the one hand, our species has an amazing promise to get off this rock and explore the stars if we can figure out the math behind, getting to Proxima Centauri and then hopefully discovering a useful planet there. But first and foremost, we need to colonize our own solar system, and if we can achieve this before we blow ourselves up, then we will at least have made somewhat of a mark on the galaxy around us. But what lies beyond that, we aren't really sure. The idea of the Fermi paradox is alarming, one, because it highlights what could either happen to us or it could serve as a massive relief that we have already moved past one of the most difficult hurdles in life to overcome, and we're pretty much good to go. The generalized thinking is, where is everyone? Shouldn't the cosmos be teeming with life all around us? Shouldn't someone somewhere be just as naive as our species and then try to talk to us? This sets up the thinking that either there is no life out there and we are the only ones really who haven't experienced a cleansing yet, or some issue is coming around that is going to annihilate us. Or really, maybe we are just the first to overcome that barrier. Essentially, there are millions of reasons why another species, or potentially even Homo sapiens, may not reach the level that we are now, or even just a little beyond it, but then they flame out due to their own stupidity or unforeseen aggressor. Either way, this results in something known as the Great Barrier. The Great Barrier can come in many forms. For example, maybe multicellular life doesn't actually form everywhere and all life on a planet remains just single-celled. Or maybe the gravity is too great for a species to overcome and leave their planet, so they're just stuck there. Or maybe they just blow themselves up as soon as they figure out how to split an atom. Potentially, maybe they even leave their planet and then just fill the surrounding solar system with war, which humanity is 100% guaranteed to do, or maybe there's even no way to travel faster than light, or at least no one has figured it out. And this isolates any species and then confines them to one area until their sun ages and explodes, which then leads to their extinction. But what if there is a culling species? One that does not want others, who maybe would be empire builders, encroaching on their land. So when they are recognized, they are eradicated. In the events of The Dead Don't Die, it's the end of the world and everyone looks incredibly bored. That was basically my face when I was watching. As the day shifts to random nighttime, I suppose, for no rhyme or reason, the dead begin to rise all around town, then the country, and then the world. As economists try to say it's not due to the polar fracking, ironically, they could be correct. But the question is, what exactly is causing the dead to operate, and how might this not violate the laws of thermodynamics? I mean, it definitely messes with entropy, but it is what it is. Well, let's discuss that in today's episode. But first, this episode is sponsored by Factor. Are you ready to have access to ready-to-eat meals that you can prepare in just 2 minutes? With over 35 different options a week, including keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, and more, like protein-focused meals, which I usually go for, these meals are sure to satisfy. By heading to factor75.com or clicking the link below and using code Roanoke50, you can get 50% off your first box and free wellness shots for life as long as you are an active subscriber. So about 2 years ago, I got offered a sponsorship with Factor, and I enjoyed the meals so much that I actually ended up purchasing them for myself and have kept that subscription ever since. I've also never been in better shape ever in my life. The reason is Factor has absolutely delicious meals that are good for you, that are also less expensive than takeout, and again, they're just healthier. Plus, they are never frozen, so there's no thawing issue like in the process of when you want to eat. Just put them in the microwave for 2 minutes and they are ready to be consumed. All this has led to the fact that I can be healthier, and when I'm hungry for something, I just eat Factor. So if that sounds good to you, then by heading to factor75.com or clicking the link below and using code Roanoke50, you can get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life, which are 2 wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you are an active subscriber. All right, let's get back to it. So we kick off our story looking at a graveyard. As the 5-0 pulls up with a pellet dispenser no less, they then head back into the woods. And wait a minute, is that Bill Murray? Last zombie movie he was in didn't go so well for him, so let's see how this one pans out. So the key is to not pretend to be a zombie, at least from what I've seen. As Kylo Ren then backs him up, they find a rabbit completely skinned by a warm fire pit. Someone took the time to skin the rabbit and then hides in the bushes. Hermit Bob, as he's known. Brandishing his force multiplier, he then takes a pot shot at the officers, and that happens to be against the law, you know. They then lose track of him almost immediately, telling him not to steal the farmer's chicken. They then head back into town as Hermit calls them something antagonizing once again. Kylo and Garfield continue their trip back to town, talking about bringing Bob in. And yes, I will be referring to Bill Murray as Garfield this whole episode, so if you want to click off now, don't be a huge nerd, don't do that. Because look, I don't make the rules, I just work here. They talk about how it's already 20 after 8 and how daylight savings time is all out of whack because it isn't even dark yet. And I don't know, man. In the South, the sun stays out till about like 9 p.m. Then again, we were about to learn some information that is really probably not that great for him. Meanwhile, over at the Herbert camp, Bob looks down at some ants, noticing that they are freaking out currently, like it's the end of the world. They get a call over the radio about something strange going on, Though, as Mindy mentions, daylight savings time issue as well is kind of freaking her out. And I think we can all appreciate how much of an issue this is as our clocks jump forward an hour last Saturday, at least, you know, in the US. And I think, does Europe do daylight savings time? I don't actually know. I don't think, do they? I've never actually, does the rest of the world do daylight savings time? I could look it up, but it's better just to ask the question and in the comments I'll just get flamed because that's what this channel's about. So anyways, I'm consistently tired now. Probably you as well. Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? Kylo then tries to use his cell, but it's dead. That would appear like it was an EMP blast of sorts. Scanning the radio though, it does still work, as the dead does, well, the title is The Dead Don't Die on the radio, plays. So maybe not a full EMP blast, as obviously some electronics are working, because in a real one, nothing's gonna work. So after the major fourth wall break, Kylo says, well, it's the theme song, that's why it sounds so familiar. This movie, intentionally due to the director, has so many fourth wall breaks and shots that linger into oblivion. Like, this is this guy's thing. Like, I'm just giving you a heads up. The movie is an hour and 44 minutes. Legitimately, it technically didn't have to be that long, but it's creative art, so it can be as long as they want. Rolling down the road, welcome to Centersville, where evidently nobody lives. Like, it seems like literally no one. That is until we head over to the diner. They're talking about, like, basically how Hermit Bob stole one of Frank's chickens and how Frank is, you know, kind of a jerk. And over the radio, a report comes on stating that the polar fracking may have slowed Earth's rotation. They talk about how, let's not listen to what the scientists think about this, let's listen to the economists. And that would be horrifying if the Earth actually did slow down this much. This caused Earth's axis to tilt. Basically, that is an extinction level event for humanity and everything else here. Like, no joke. If our rotation actually slowed down, you are talking about legitimate cataclysms on the surface of this world. Category 6 hurricanes, one side of the Earth basically receiving way too much solar energy while the other not enough, the magnetic field protecting the Earth weakening, cats and dogs laying together, pure chaos. Humanity would be cooked, as the younglings say. So now we jump over to Geronimo and these two girls that he talks to, hanging out with CDC security. Why are they called CDC security? No idea. But the qualifications are you have to be bald and swole. Over at the store, the WUPS, which this literal logo looks like it was designed by AI, drops off some weird newspapers. So you might be asking yourself, why would this be such a bad thing? More sunlight on plants is a good thing, right? Wrong! Let me explain. So, if you were not aware, while the plants will take in sunlight and then convert CO2 into glucose for themselves, they need a night cycle in order to complete photosynthesis to actually obtain glucose. Sort of like how we need sleep, you know, we need rest in order for our bodies to make repairs and undergo functions that are critical that it doesn't do while awake. If you were to stay up, say, 2 full weeks, you would die. I'm actually paying off a sleep debt myself, and now I'm painfully aware I will hallucinate when I have too little sleep. That was a fun 24 hours. Anyhow, with plants, the same can be said. At night, this conversion will take place, which allows for them to enter something known as the Calvin cycle. Essentially, carbon is affixed, ATP is created for the cell to actually function, much like what we need, and plants could operate essentially for a limited period of time in a longer day and shorter night, but eventually they would not have enough energy as the leaves would then turn pale and eventually die. This would eventually lead to a complete breakdown of the ecosystem, as herbivores would go next, and then finally carnivores, with then scavengers being basically the last of the last. Humanity would arguably hang on the longest because we will turn scavenger if bad enough, but there's no way that we could ever attempt to keep pace and adapt with the way the Earth seems to be changing. However, as we will find out, the actual day and night cycles make very little sense, as sometimes the day is like 30 hours, and then sometimes it's 5 hours. So the store owner is a little freaked out as Dean drops some wisdom on him about how the world is perfect, just appreciate the details. Meanwhile, the hermit finds some mushrooms in areas where they shouldn't be, and yeah, the whole planet appears to be stopping. There's about to be a whole bunch of ecological issues, as mentioned. No lie, pure panic for me. Something about being confined to one area, this planet, and then it stops doing what it's supposed to. Like, have you ever witnessed a solar eclipse when the light dims considerably? Even that rustles my jimmies just a little bit. Like, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, and I know what's happening, but biologically, my body knows something is amiss, and this is out of the ordinary. Now just imagine knowing the planet's spin is completely changing, and then try not to panic daily or minutely about that. So he cuts some of the mushrooms for dinner and then continues on his way. Over at another person's house, the news report talks about how pets are becoming more aggressive over the changes, and as the continuous day continues, Frank finds his dog under his truck as it runs off. The dogs have also lost their minds. So as Frank looks out where his cows would be, they're all gone, as well as his chickens, with Bob watching them having all gone towards the woods. Basically, every animal except for humans is trying to GTFO. Over at the police station, Mallory ended up dropping in a cell as Garfield remarks she's not getting any older. As they talk about Mallory, which was her name, Garfield remarks how the reason she can't go to the morgue is because it's filled by 2 golfers who were struck by lightning. They keep talking about the daylight being strange, and everyone has the same feeling that this is all going to end badly. So over at the diner, as they talk about Mallory and how she used to be pretty, well, we all age, it's absolutely relentless, they discuss Zelda over at the morgue and how she has eyes that just look straight through you and how she's a little strange. We will find out she's more than just a little strange. Over at the morgue, for some reason, there's a samurai room with like a golden Buddha, not really sure why, but hey, why not? Practicing, she then sheaths her sword and then is evidently done for the day. Walking over to the stiffs room, one of the arms has escaped from underneath the sheets when she says, well, that's a little peculiar, as then the body moves under the sheets slightly. So nighttime finally arrives as Garfield falls asleep in a jail cell next to Mallory, which that's a little disturbing. Longest Monday ever, am I right? That was a really bad joke. And over at the CDC security area, Lily wakes up as her friends ask, like, oh, are you all right? Basically, everyone is having the same creepy feeling. Could be the impending doom of a planet rendering you extinct, huh? Maybe, might have something to do with the day and night cycles being completely jacked up. In the woods, though, as the hermit lays on the ground, he looks up at the moon and then talks about how there's toxic lunar vibrations. Yes, of course, whatever those are. Those are, in fact, not toxic lunar vibrations, but we will get there soon enough. So it is at this point something starts happening. The dead truly don't die as a hand emerges from the grave. The moon itself is covered in charged particles as anyone buried still has functional muscles, or if they still have functional muscles, they begin getting up. But I don't actually believe it's just that. I think there's more to it. I imagine you need to be a little fresh to actually be able to pull this off. So while that's happening, Lily at the diner is cleaning as Fern goes to exit the diner because she's done for the night. As she opens the door, she immediately gets attacked and bitten as the other turns towards Lily. She gets attacked as they are both eaten by the zombies. And they are in fact zombies, not infected, as Wow Such Gaming puts it. As they continue snacking on their woman witch, they mention coffee as they start drinking, as Lily is still alive over there in probably great amount of pain, so you can hear her like yelping the whole time. And the zombies look at one another as they head back outside. Also, speaking of Wow Such Gaming, March 20th through the 25th, him and I are going to be at PAX East in Boston. So if you're there, you can just recognize us bar for it. Anyways, so we'll see you there. The next morning, there's no telling what time it actually is because days aren't really days and nights are probably just as long. The phone rings at the gas station as Garfield gets a call from Hank. It's 6:30 p.m. and currently everyone's sleep schedule is completely jacked. Hank had gone to the diner and found evidence of the attack. Garfield then heads in and looks for himself. Yeah, Fern and Lily are pretty much donezo. Kylo at this point then shows up in his smart car. She's built for 2, and she vibrates. As they head in to take a look, he's got pretty much the same reaction. They don't know if it was a wild animal or several wild animals. Mindy then rolls up to the place as they direct her inside as well. Her reaction is also the same. She comes out and says it must have been a wild animal or several wild animals. She then goes to throw it behind the Prius as then Hank heads out at this point. Although, not a bad truck that he's got. Those Nissan trucks, honestly, back then, they kind of rivaled Tacomas. In fact, some would argue they were even a little more reliable than Tacomas. But now Nissan just, I'm sorry, it totally sucks. It's not even really worth mentioning. But again, the director's whole shtick is lingering shots for a long time to convey emotion and pointing out tropes that exist in modern film. For instance, in this case, it was like, oh, let's repeat the same thing because there's a comedic spin to it. If 2 different characters, unbeknownst to each other, repeated the same thing. Like, I'm no film reviewer. I'm just here for the science. But I just kind of figured I'd convey that for a moment. So Garfield asks Kylo what he thinks. Somehow Kylo instantly knows. He's like, yeah, it's zombies. Jumping over to an absolute classic bro. Is that Selena Gomez? It's a group of youngish adults. As they check their phones are also no longer working. So they turn on the radio and there's really not a lot of channels. And they continue to say that polar fracking is great for our country as the theme song plays once again. It's the only song that's actually on the radio. They then share an energy drink as Selena notices that they need gas. Classic cars can pass everything but a gas station. Meanwhile, the moon still ain't looking right. Stopping at a gas station, Selena then heads in with the crew to pay for the gas. They call the gas station clerk Frodo, which everybody else does, or at least the delivery guy calls him that as well, as Selena asks if there's a motel in town. It's an old school motel. Heading back outside, the clerk then talks about how the car looks awesome, and we now learn Selena's name is Zoe, but really it's Selena. Also, I bet you were sitting there and you're like, oh man, did Roanoke just gloss over a classic? Absolutely not. We're gonna talk about the Le Mans. This right here is a 1967 Pontiac Le Mans specifically. I believe it to be the Sport Coupe version, which means it would have a 350 V8 twin-barrel carburetor producing around 150 horsepower. There was a Le Mans that was a base Le Mans that had a 250 engine, which is a 6-cylinder, but it was way less popular, probably because, you know, much like my 67 Impala, these things were big and heavy. An inline 6 could move the car, but much like my 1996 4Runner, you weren't getting on the highway above 45 miles per hour. Pontiac hasn't done a a ton of things right in my eyes, but the Le Mans is a pretty good contender. If you want to see kind of a ridiculous version of this car, you should go over to Junkyard Diggs channel and look at a Pontiac Le Mans he has. I've seen that thing in real life. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's pretty bad. Anyways, where was I? Ah, yes, the actual movie where the dead are rising. Now, eventually, something is going to happen. Trust me, I promise. It's the director's fault, and this was intentional. This is why he did this. In fact, I believe the movie, if it had like normal tracking times of shots, it would have been about 3 minutes long. But over at the morgue, Kill Bill then leaves and walks downtown to the police station. She comes in and asks if the remains of the diner are coming to the morgue for preparation. Looking into a cell, she then sees the sheet move and isn't too concerned about it, as Zelda asks about Kylo to see if him and Mindy are actually a couple, and this will never be looked into or mentioned again. Back over at the motel, Selena then comes out and asks if there's a diner or restaurant in town. They tell her it's closed, as then she heads to the vending machines. Garfield then tells the motel owner to tell them to not go out and keep their motel door locked. The motel owner then tells them how all of his cats are gone. Truly the most sad outcome. I would miss Dr. Mambo much how I miss my other cats. But they totally think I'm dead now, so it is what it is. Kylo then goes to tell them as they sort of just kind of laugh at him, but back at the hermit, he has walked through the woods and he finds a book on Moby Dick for some, I'm sure this is supposed to mean something, and then he just takes it with him. Maybe like man's, I don't know, relentless chase of glory and things, because this is mentioned in the movie at the ending. It's consumerism, basically. Over at the correctional facility, they look out and say, well, it looks pretty normal to them. Geronimo then sneaks up on them and tells them about the diner. He thinks they are undead due to them being animated by Earth's rotation, or reanimated by Earth's rotation, and then this is causing them all to arise from their graves. This will be mentioned several more times. He's then spotted by Stone Cold Steve Austin, as the guard then tells him it's time to leave. So finally we head over to the frickin' cemetery. Kyle talks about separating the offspring's graves from like the adults, and Garfield just happens to fall due to a zombie hole. In front of one of the graves, they can see it has been dug out, as Kylo remarks again, this isn't going to end well. They're also being watched by the hermit. They then get into their car and then head out of there, a little weirded out by the event. The hermit then approaches and investigates the same thing. Ghouls have come up. Alright, I swear, something is going to happen any minute now. So as Kylo and Garfield drive, they then talk about how Garfield was supposed to retire 2 years ago, but didn't. Their plan is to inform the town about the zombie presence. They decide not to stop off at Farmer Miller's because screw that guy. They then talk about how maybe to take out a zombie, and Kylo says basically just take off the head. It's the only way to put him down for good, unless they're necromorph zombies, in which case you gotta go for the limbs. Back at the gas station, Frodo is helping out Hank by getting him armed up, and Hank though isn't really sure if they're zombies. And Frodo pretty much convinces him in about 2 seconds, yeah, they're definitely zombies, don't worry about it. So, as they lock and load Brides of Christ, apparently they tried to get the town involved, but nobody wanted to help. We then jump over to the younglings in the motel, watching a news report about how it must have been a wild animal, or several wild animals. As one of the guys then checks his watches, it's still messed up. So a field of effect appears to be around the town. So they lock the door and then stay in, while the moon continues looking a bit strange. That night, even more begin to come up from the ground, as now it's a full-on invasion. Now you gotta ask yourself, why would they still have all this flesh? Shouldn't there be a bit more slim pickings, I guess? Let's discuss. So as we can tell first, this again isn't just a town issue, this is evidently a global problem, and it is stated it's caused by polar fracking, but evidence we see on the moon would suggest there's something else kind of going on here. The moon lacks a magnetic field, which in turn should obviously make the charged particles surrounding it appear a little strange. So what is happening? To understand this, we need to understand Earth's own magnetic field, which in turn will help us kind of figure out how the undead are getting back up. And that's right, we are about to make a whole bunch of connections to physical science and our own biology, because remember, we live on Earth, so that means everything Earth is subjected to, we are subjected to, and even what Earth is creating, we are subjected to. In fact, interestingly enough, it has been said that astronauts in space cannot like detect the hum of the Earth as it's like a very, very low frequency. You can't hear it, but you can feel it, and because their body can't detect that hum, it actually causes them to be super anxious in space. That, or it's because they're also flying around at 17,000 miles per hour, falling over the edge of Earth. Could be one or the other. So to begin, Earth's magnetic field is critically important for all life on this planet. This field, with the north being towards the North Pole and the south being towards the South Pole, hasn't always been the same arrangement. In fact, quite regularly the poles will flip, and when that happens, it's going to absolutely wreak havoc on human technology and navigation, as we already know the poles are weakening, which allows for the flip to take place. Now, remember, this is not a physical flip. It's not like the South Pole is going to be where the North Pole is and everything's going to be upside down, and Australia is going to be right side up, so they no longer need their ground harnesses. What it really is just the magnetic poles are flipping. So what's really hilarious though Now that you know this can happen, or you probably already did, but if there's a solar storm and we get hit while this flip is taking place, the magnetic field will not be able to shield us from the charged particles, and this planet will be cooked. Like, our atmosphere will be ripped away, we will suffocate, or we'll just be totally taken out by gamma radiation. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Anyways, existential dread aside, I'm sure we will be okay. Surely we aren't that unlucky as a species. Surely. So this magnetic field is generated by the core itself spinning, or at least it is thought to be, because even still we don't 100% know. If this slowdown happens, then the iron core specifically is going to be the thing slowing down as well. The crust will pull on magma, which will then pull on the core, slowing it down. This will create a weaker magnetic field overall, and this will actually affect animals as we have seen. It may be possible that almost every animal, including humans, can sense the magnetic field on Earth. It's just whether or not it's useful for us. Now, take that statement with a grain of salt, as it's generally accepted we cannot actually feel the magnetic field, but there are some contradictory reports that we actually can. But the point is, there are some animals that are guided specifically by Earth's magnetic field, birds being the most clear indicator, as birds are absolutely going goblin mode, flying in every direction due to their disorientation, and so too are the ants that have the same ability for the most part. These examples show to me that Earth is being weakened by allegedly the polar fracking, but I don't believe that is the only thing taking place. I think something else is going on. Given the crust of the planet is wildly fluctuating in terms of how long day and night is, this isn't simply just a problem of Earth's spin slowing down. This is a direct interference by something. But this would still have the unfortunate consequences on Earth's magnetic field, making it weaker. Looking at the moon again, these are charged particles being directed at Earth, and the moon appears to be in the way, showing that as they move around, it's creating interference. But the particles aren't the issue. I think it falls more in line with energy itself being the problem. Well, a problem in a sense, because the reality is there is some evidence to support that electromagnetic radiation of certain frequencies can repair tissue, which we will kind of get to in a moment. But to sum up these points, Earth's magnetic field appears to be weakening from an intentional event, causing the planet's rotation to be chaotic. This is indicated by animals absolutely losing any sense of direction, and along with that, human electronics that are highly sensitive to certain frequencies begin having issues of staying powered on, along with radio signals becoming incomprehensible or distorted. All will become clear soon though, as long as I'm not some cracked out biologist making videos on YouTube. Uh-oh. Back over at the motel, the owner keeps trying to find his cats. Unlike Dr. Mambo, who keeps harassing me, his cats are gone. As the motel owner looks up, it's now nighttime at 5 p.m., so the days are, again, not making any sense. What a statement. He's quickly grabbed by some zombies as they ask about free cable, as then they eat him. I love how cavalier Kylo is about the zombies in this movie though, but as they turn around, Mallory is back up in action asking for Chardonnay as Garfield takes a few pot shots at her before Kylo goes after her. He's able to take off her head, but it's way more difficult as dust just comes out. She continues asking for Chardonnay even if she's just ahead, which how's the air moving past the vocal cords? Try not to think too much about it. I mean, either way, it's not an ideal situation, but it appears as though a direct shot to the head does work. So here, we begin to see some of the problems associated with the bodies of those who have risen. Clearly, desiccation is a problem. Their blood has been turned to dust as it has completely coagulated and dried out, which is pretty standard actually. Of course, the rest of the body does the same, but in this case, they are instead filled with dust. So what is happening? As made mention, there is the idea that I have come up with that Earth is somehow being affected by some form of energy, and due to the weakening of our magnetic field, this is landing directly on the surface, and as a result of that, it's landing directly on humans. And it would appear along with this may have an impact on the bodies of people, even those under the ground. And to understand this, we need to actually learn about electromagnetic frequencies and how they may actually be beneficial to human cellular activity concerning proliferation. So everyone who has gotten up appears to be somewhat fresh, and why this particular town would have this many people dropping is a bit of a mystery, but this may hint at something else happening. While we know bone cells can last for a few days after expiration of a person, this would not indicate that they are really being rebuilt from already existing living tissue. The reason is electromagnetic frequencies ranging from about 3 Hz to 60 Hz actually do have therapeutic properties on wound repair in the human body. It seems to be the case that for this specific range, it may help cell proliferation, forcing repair as mentioned previously. Now obviously, you see the issue here. How do you take necrosed tissue and repair the body? The reality is, and this is not a cop-out, it's just an observation, there is another form of energy hitting the body, and this form of energy goes beyond just wound repair and appears to actually take over cellular metabolism of any cell that may still exist, even as a dead cell, but has not undergo apoptosis or been degraded degrades to the point that it's building an entire new cell just to replace it. So here we go. If you are buried in a coffin, it will take you roughly about a year for the process to begin as far as decomposition, or at least within a year. That said, it takes up to a decade to fully decompose, leaving only a skeleton. With this in mind, the process does not take place as it normally does on the surface due to embalming, as well as like being exposed to the elements, so hopefully no insects are getting to you, at least down there, but this part's important and we'll discuss it later. So because of this, those that may have been between possibly years 1 and 5, we will say, would be able to still effectively move and have meat on their bones, and this would require the actual restarting of cellular activity beyond a normal metabolism and the repair of the body in some ways, allowing for them to appear. While the two at the diner got up first, it may be because they were still underground at this point and were, kind of a little more fresh, while others didn't get up around this point because they still needed more time in order to grow more tissue as inspired by the electromagnetic frequencies coming from elsewhere. Eventually, though, they reached a point where they were able to get up and get moving, and this helps to explain how the town got taken over so quickly. When a person is dropped, the tissue they have is still quite viable, and they are still extremely juicy. As the EM frequencies hit their body, this will resuscitate those cells, and there still appears to be extensive damage for basically how they got. Specifically though, in some areas that are going to be worse than others, this is going to be brain damage. As a person continues doing the thing they used to do based on muscle memory, which is usually, if I remember correctly, this kind of comes from the cerebellum area of the brain, which is associated with motor functions. Basically, when you muscle memory something, you're still using your brain, it's just a different portion of your brain. But however, they are not going to have higher thought because the cerebrum is going to be too degraded, and this is, frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Interestingly though, they will still have memories, and this indicates that while extremely low, there is some brain activity to speak of within the skull. Potentially, neurons are resuscitated by the same factors that got the body up and moving, as far as their skin, bones, muscle, and motor neurons, pretty much everything that keeps a person moving. But if a cell is too far gone, while some of them can be repaired, not all of it can. And this creates areas of damage so vast that the brain, the EM frequencies that are being projected onto him, it cannot repair, or maybe it takes too long for this to be viable, which seems rather intentional, doesn't it? But we will get there here in a second. I know I keep stringing you along, but it's kind of how I keep you listening and watching these. So something to remember about the human metabolism as we talk about cells reanimating is ATP produces a negative charge, and that's the literal goal. That's how our cells run and how we get energy from turning ATP into ADP, which is adenosine triphosphate into adenosine diphosphate. If something were to come along that could perfectly fill that negative energy role, like another electron somehow, from an outside source, and I'm glossing over some massive complexities concerning the human metabolic cycle, then essentially it may be possible to power a cell from an external source instead of an internal one. But again, this involves technology that we aren't even aware of yet. So over at the morgue, for some reason, Zelda is putting on makeup concerning the stiffs, and as she does, one of their eyes open. She closes the eyes before realizing this is a slight issue. She backs up as they sit up, and then she pulls out a samurai blade, taking them both out instantly as they fall back down. Over at Farmer Miller's, someone is trying to get inside. Grabbing a pellet dispenser, he opens up the door, because that's what you do, and then gets grabbed immediately. But he's able to take him out, getting dust all over himself. Over at the gas station, people are attempting to return to their former lives. I mean, it is pretty messed up. As the delivery driver is there as well, his eyes, for some reason, changed and are a bit strange, specifically his pupils have become like a cat's pupils. Honestly, your guess is as good as mine with that one. There are many threads in this movie that go completely unanswered and are never talked about again, and this is one of them. So as the whole town now seems to have changed, people are running through the motions of what they would do in their living life and what they would also say. As Hank and Frodo then hold up at the tool store, about to be overwhelmed, the cops roll past, deciding not to help as Frodo takes a shot again and then headshots another one as it's lined up. Hank then takes out another, and this sort of brings up a question though. If the brain being destroyed stops the undead, this indicates that in some capacity it is in control, or what I think, it's serving as a conduit. And why is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Something to know about the human brain is simply by existing and us thinking and just our being, we create an electromagnetic field. It's very, very small, it's very, very weak, but we do, which in turn can impact brain function. It's all very interesting, but the point is, while the brain produces this field, it may also be susceptible to an electromagnetic field if strong enough. While it's possible, this could suggest maybe that the orders could be placed on the brain that is barely functioning and then have those orders carried out. I believe in this context, that's exactly what's happening because of what we will see. So the correctional facility is now under under siege as both Stone Cold Steve Austins are taken out. They then run to the closet as they begin hiding as the guards, again, are torn apart. But that doesn't just appear to be this area. Again, it's mentioned how it's across the country and across the globe. As the radio begins distorting, as it seems this is a planet issue, everybody's dealing with the same problem. One of the interesting things is just for a moment the screen flickers and shows the undead attacking on like the TV itself. As stated, with the electromagnetic field hitting Earth, could brains that have been long gone have this image and visualizations, I guess is the best way to put it, projected into their brains as some sort of order to be carried out, making them aggressive towards the non-infected. None of the cops think also that this is going to get any better. So Mindy then starts freaking out as a result, with the hotel manager changed and also eating somebody's arm. He starts making his way back to his office, and the hermit still hasn't been spotted, though he sees all the birds flying in one direction, saying, "Now that's what I call a murder of crows." Yeah, they're pretty much all noping out of there. So Kill Bill is now headed down the street, just completely decimating the undead, and as they let her in, she addresses everyone by their full names, which is a little strange, and then asks them what their plan of action is. Garfield says, "Well, we're supposed to patrol the community. That is our job, so let's go patrol the community." Zelda suggests that they meet up in a wee while in the cemetery. She asks Kylo for his vehicle as he has a Star Wars keychain, and I've been calling him Kylo the whole time. Like, I write these things usually as I'm watching them, and that's a character that he plays, Kylo Ren. I don't know. I didn't think that was going to be in the movie, but it was. Fourth wall break. Whoa! So, driving through the community, Kylo then takes out one in particular, as it looks like everyone else has gotten, as in, they just kind of gravitate towards what they were doing while they were alive. Garfield then runs over a guy as the farmer gets pulled out of his house and then infected. Pulling up to the motel, as you can tell, there are 5 places in this movie total. Door number 3 is open as they all decide to go check it out just in case. It's the younglings, and they have all been taken out. Bummer, bro. So, like, is that Le Mans free game, or what's the deal with that now? So Kylo then proceeds to destroy the head on everyone as they don't come back, or doesn't want them to come back. So he stops at Selena Gomez, however, finding the CD that she had bought just before being taken out as well. Grabbing her head, well, like a lot of things in this movie, this is gonna have to be blurred. So Kylo says they're just dead hipsters, but they could turn. It just takes a while. I mean, technically speaking, he did what he had to do. So while that goes on, pretty sure Zelda is an alien, as then she waves on the computers and then types something up. Ah, so it's invasion of Earth, perhaps. As the undead try to break in, she brandishes her sword, getting ready to go. Kylo puts the CD playing the same song that is prevalent all throughout the movie. Driving through town, he then chucks, or at least Garfield chucks the CD out, as he can't take it anymore, because that song is just enough. Which, same though. So this is about the slowest zombie invasion I have ever seen in my life. As they pull up to the tool supply area, they notice the undead and then debate again on, helping Frank and Frodo, but they have, however, built a barricade, and the few guys that were in the shop met there in a car wreck, but the store is pretty much closed up. But as they sit there, another door starts getting burst open. As it opens, it ain't looking good for the home team. They accept their fates, which, no thanks. Swing away, Meryl. Never accept your fate. Fight to the last man, because you never know. Maybe you'll surprise yourself. Over at the correctional facility, the 3 then exit the closet and make their way downstairs and are able to escape. Over at the farm, again, I lied earlier, Frank hasn't gotten got yet, but he's still fighting, but finally he gets overwhelmed as Hermit Bob watches. Heading to the cemetery, the cop car gets stuck on all the undead that Garfield has been running over, as they then surround the car. Garfield reminds them that they are not ordinary pedestrians, which is why he ran them over. As they continue to surround the car, Kylo and Garfield kind of get into it as one of the undead starts saying Mindy because it's her grandmother. Kylo does very little to help her with her freak out as Mindy gets out of the car to join her grandmother and gets torn apart. That was a very stupid idea. Kylo then locks the door as they seem to not be able to do very much to get in the car themselves. Back in town, Zelda makes her way to the graveyard as she avoids all the undead quite easily. She calls the car an amusing machine as she stops by one of the undead and then takes her out. This one was modeling. Why exactly? I'm sure it's supposed to mean something, but I don't know what it means. So the 3 from the correctional facility watch all this happening and go elsewhere to look for a place to hide, and this will be the last we see of them. Again, literally nothing is mentioned or talked about again with them. It's just sort of like, okay, so here's a thread that leads nowhere. Gotcha. Again, movie could have been like 3 minutes, but I get it. That's what the director was intentionally poking fun at, I guess. So back over at the cop car, they find Dan Perkins, the motel owner, and Garfield apologizes to Kylo if he lost it. He tells Kylo, well, you've been acting a lot different since this all, like, the world's been ending, and that he seems oddly controlled. Kylo then says he's dealing with it in his own way. Garfield asks how he knows it's going to end badly because he's been saying that since the beginning, and Kylo tells him, well, it's because I read the script. But what is even happening in this movie? Jim, the director, had given him the whole script. Garfield only got the scenes. So they call the guy who wrote the movie a dick as then we jump back over to Zelda. Entering the graveyard, she spots the cruiser in the distance and proceeds to take out a few of the undead. As they notice her though, they decide to leave the cruiser and go after her. Hermit Bob, of course, watches from the tree line as he always does. As he looks up the sky though, oh, here we go, it's aliens. So they arrive as Zelda makes her way towards underneath it with a lot of the undead. Garfield asks if that was in the script, which Kylo confirms that was not in the script, as Zelda stands underneath it and then beams her up Scotty. The ship then completely nopes out of there off of the planet, being completely unexpected. Kylo and Garfield remark that that was unusual, or at least that explains what was weird about her, and Garfield then asks Kylo how this is supposed to end. He says they gotta give it their best shot, but then it ends badly. So they agree to give it their best shot and just sort of see what happens. Exiting the cruiser, they then walk into the cemetery as we get a voiceover from Hermit Bob talking about how they're among the dead and consumerism has consumed all the zombies and materialism and did you get your teeth cleaned today? And I don't know, donate blood. It's flabbergasted. Anyways, as Hermit Bob continues talking, the undead approach the two as they continue fighting, but really, they should have like worked on the cardio or maybe like just go around the outside of the cemetery. Garfield says that he can't do it as Hank like walks up to him. He's like, I can't take you out. And Hank's like, okay, so he's undead. He just kind of walks off, strangely enough. They then also find Mindy as Kylo takes her out and they get backed up, which is why you don't go into the middle of them. And it becomes a commentary once again, like materialism all throughout. No idea what's happening anymore. So Kylo and Garfield then got overwhelmed and turned into undead themselves. And thus concludes, the dead don't die. So as we could tell, this is an alien-inspired event. We would like to think that as a species, or if another species, somebody wanted Earth, it would have to be something like you'd have to come fight us for it, right? Well, why do that when you can just create a bunch of undead to attack the living and then turn them in ranks? What I believe is happening specifically is aliens that see another species that could eventually leave their own planet, they end up wanting to take them out. Because again, if there's limited amount of resources in space, which there is a limited amount of resources in space, there could be a more dominant form of life that doesn't want any of the other species rising up and then taking those resources. I said this once in a video before and somebody argued with me for like a single comment because I didn't even bother responding afterwards. But it was like, bro, there's a limited amount of resources. It is finite in the galaxy. It's a lot from our perspective, but maybe from another animal's perspective, it's not a lot. Anyhow, they inspire an event that would disable the planet's magnetic field and then begin beaming this form of energy at the planet, allowing for the dead to rise. Contained within are instructions on what they're supposed to do, which then causes them to behave in such a way that is seen as aggressive. Once the process is complete, likely they leave the planet, turn off the energy, and then let the undead wither away, leaving the planet completely free of a sapient race. It seems as though the animals were not affected in the same capacity, likely because animals, unless in very rare cases, like sometimes with elephants, they do not really attempt to bury their dead. Instead, they wither away quickly, meaning that the only species that is really going to be affected are the ones that bury their dead, and this is going to be the intelligent race, which is the one they are intentionally trying to get rid of. Sort of like a self-solving problem. What they do after it is a mystery, but considering the alien was able to survive here and live here for Lord knows how long and breathe our air, very clearly they are suited to this environment, and as a result, it will likely be colonized by the invading race. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be amazing of you, as it helps get the video out there, and if you really enjoyed, we are approaching 1 million subscribers, and subscribing would be baller of you. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link in the description, and speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, huge thank you to our astronaut, Ron Burgundy. Thank you very much, my man. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Desk Dancer, and our scientist, Chad the Enjoyer of Scientific Explanations of B-grade horror movies, Coda 23, Jax, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Trash Panda in a trench coat. And to the rest of my patrons, I appreciate y'all's support as well. You are greatly thanked. Not the right word, doesn't matter. Couldn't do without you guys, so thank you. But all right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.